Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Albert Wexler. I'm the director of Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and we are here at Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast offices with Nir Boms. Dr. Nir Boms, you have just come straight from the action. I mean, you are the major in reserves, Home Front Command, Gaza Brigade, and you have also a splendid academic career, a research fellow at Moshe Dayan Center and Tel Aviv University. Thank you for being with us at this very, very busy time of yours.
It's good to be with you, Albert.
Now, you are an expert of Middle East. I mean, I've been enjoying your talks at the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and you spoke so much about the new, normalization process, Abraham Accords. Where are we now?
Well, we are in a difficult spot, both in Israel and in the Middle East. Just to remind you that a month ago, if we would have had this conversation, we could open it very differently. We were on the verge of signing or continuing a very interesting process with Saudi Arabia that was itself a result of a process that in the last few years culminated with the Abraham Accords, created a whole set of normalization protocols in the Middle East. We've seen interesting engagements from Indonesia and Pakistan all the way to the heart of the Middle East. I can tell you that I have hosted in my own house in the past few years people from all of these countries, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and others as a part of this ongoing engagement. And we have been beginning to think about this whole notion of a Middle East that's becoming, rather than a win-lose, it's coming to a win-win. Looks about prosperity, roads, railroads, economic routes, and all of a sudden we are finding ourselves in a very difficult spot where the entire dynamic that was tried to move beyond the Israeli-Palestinian conflict tried to put again the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the top.
Nir, I was really getting a lot concerned with the Prime Minister's speech at the UN. I mean, I understand the Saudi normalization talks, would give Israel a tremendous advantage, and also Saudis, they would sell their gas and oil in much better price than Iran and Russia. But wasn't the writing on the wall? I mean, there were warnings about such an attack coming.
Look, when here there is an expression that we will meet 6 o'clock after the war, and once we will get there, when we'll have another conversation, then you can have open many files about what had happened here. What had happened here has been a failure on a number of levels, on a number of fronts. This is not the time to analyze all of it, but some of the writing, of course, has been on the wall, both tactically and also in somewhat strategically. But there was still an attempt to say or to put the Israeli-Palestinian conflict where it belongs. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict should not be the conflict that drives politics in the Middle East. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict should not be the conflict that dictates the politics for all of the allies. The Abraham Accords were actually an indicator and a sign for some of the allies, the new allies, our new friends, quote unquote, who have been saying we don't want to be captured by the Palestinian politics, or particularly by radicals supported by Iran and Qatar, who are there to destroy rather than to build. This is, by the way, why the Saudis just recently said, normalization talks are not over. We're not sealing them away. Why? Because we do not want eventually to let the Iranians win. Iran, Hamas, the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Qatar, which I think very much belongs to this. These are people who want to take the Middle East backwards, not forward. And I think still we can say it about some of the allies, despite of the crisis in public opinion that is very much against Israel, some of them do want to take the Middle East forward. We need to work with the moderates and with those who believe that we need to move away from the radical axis, because that doesn't take the Middle East forward. And even if they want to take this, the perspective of Palestinian perspective, it doesn't take the Palestinians any further. What did Hamas do for the average Palestinians? Aside of creating war after war that eventually kills not just the Nuhba and the terrorist of Hamas, which deserves to be killed, but also other bystanders and innocent people who did not really want to be a part of it.
Well, it's unfortunate. I mean, we woke up to a whole other reality. October 7, a shock of atrocities, the violence, it's undescribable. I mean, I'm going over this time after time because this is what we hear on Israeli radio, the testimonies and stories of people. But do you think that the Abraham Accords will stand? Do you think that Saudis will keep to their word of normalization with Israel?
Albert, I'm not a prophet. And before I get to your...
I wish you were.
And before I get to the answer, I will tell you something about the atrocities that I have seen in my own eyes. I was dispatched to the south shortly after all of this began. I was there in Be'eri and in Kfar Aza and in Re'im, in just about each of the communities, and I've seen the massacre, and I've seen in my own eyes what was done. I unfortunately had the experience of still seeing the bodies on the floor and still smelling the scent of death. This is not a crime. This is something that cannot be even described in words. What we have seen there was not human. And it needs to be described and it needs to be seen because there needs to be an understanding of why this is so dangerous. Not just because they have now massacred and butchered 1,400 Israelis, because of what this is doing for the entire region. And this is an attempt to take a region that actually had a degree of positive trajectory, of trying to move from a trajectory of conflicts and ideology to a trajectory of stability, tolerance, peace, prosperity, that's supposed to take care of the fate of over 100 million people here who do not necessarily know, in the entire region, who do not necessarily have a work prospect, so do not necessarily know how they can live tomorrow. And rather than taking this region forward, they're taking it backwards. And this is supposed to be one of the most important arguments in all of this. And because I started with this is why I also believe that the Abraham Accords will prevail. Because the Abraham Accords sits on that premise. They sit on the premise that we cannot bring this region, we cannot drive this region with this win-lose politics. That we have to move to win-win. That we have to move to a mindset which says we have objective things in this region that we need to deal with. We have to deal with the economy. We have to deal with climate, which is a real issue. Water, we don't have enough. We need collaboration. We need desalination technology. Israel can play a major role in this. But in a country like Lebanon, that actually may have gas depositories, we need to dig them up, but we cannot do that when there's Hezbollah that's trying to prevent everything and take all the money and build weapons with it. How much money was invested in Gaza, in the Palestinians, that could have been the Singapore of the Middle East? And rather than that, they became worse than Afghanistan. That's the things that the Abraham Accords were trying to change. And I think that the people there, also because I speak with some of them, understand that we cannot surrender to that type of Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic Jihad, Iran type of politics. That we have to move beyond this. This is why I think they'll survive. But it's very difficult because public opinion is not with us. Because it's very difficult for them to fight the pictures that are coming from Al Jazeera. Even if these pictures, as we've seen yesterday, with AP, with the New York Times, with the Palestinian stringers that are taking these pictures, the journalists, quote unquote, that are actually part and parcel on Hamas payroll. Yeah. And that's part of the challenge that we have here in explaining all of this to the world.
I was very moved when you spoke about the fact that you were there right in these very beginning days, because people come with a major post-traumatic shock out of this area. And I mean, we as the society, it will take us time to heal and to process. And I'm not even talking about the families who lost their loved ones and those who have not been sleeping because their loved ones are taken as hostages, in the Gaza Strip. And you guys are really fighting at the very, very Gaza envelope. You're doing this work, for a month now.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something about what we do, particularly with my unit, which has to do with the Home Front Command. We're there fighting for the land. We are there fighting for the people who needs to come back. We had military missions that had to do with protecting volunteers who would go to crop the land, making sure that the fields are going to be harvested, making sure that there's going to be water. We sent teams to look for dogs and cats who belonged to the people who escaped, who had lost their loved ones, who had lost their family members, who have lost almost everything, and all of a sudden we were able to find their dog or their cat and bringing a smile to them. And for us, this was no less than a military mission in a closed military zone, because we need to make sure that we can grasp and grab every piece of life that we can. We have cows there that needs to be milked. We have chicken houses that needs to be taken care for. Over 60% of the vegetables in Israel come from that Gaza envelope. We cannot abandon it, even if all the people have abandoned it. So therefore we created a whole military mission to keep this land alive. And I speak with people from there every day. And some of them are broken, and some of them are torn, and many of them will have a post-trauma, and many of them have lost all their loved ones, and many of them don't know where they will be. We now have 160,000 people evacuated into hotels. We have people opening schools everywhere. We're not sure when all of them are going to return, but we already know that some of them did. And I've seen the resilience of these people. And they will tell you, look, we're not going to let Hamas win, irrespective of what they've done for us. I'm not sure if it's going to be everyone. I'm not going to blame anyone who will say, look, some of them have been a part of they were settling in Gaza before this engagement. They were evacuated from their home once, went into the Gaza envelope corridor, and now they're evacuating from their home again. And some of them will say, I don't really want to get back there. I had enough lost. But I think many others would say, no, we cannot let Hamas win. We have to be there. We have to settle the land. That's the only land we have.
Well, I sense that there is a resolve in Israeli society that we will need to make an end with this horrible entity called Hamas. We cannot just think of any way of thinking, living side by side with such murderous, horrible entity. But I want to go to another little different angle, because you are an excellent analyst, and I understand that Iran planned this thing for years. They tried to coordinate, to bring everybody together, Hezbollah, the militias in Syria, Houthis, and everybody. Somehow Hamas shot first and chose to attack without coordination. Any explanation?
Well, first, I'm not sure that lack of coordination is the right word to describe it. We have seen and traced meetings in Beirut specifically, and beforehand in Iran and elsewhere, where there has been a degree of coordination between Hamas leadership and Iranian leadership. We have seen in some of the videos some words in Farsi that were caught within the fighting itself. We have certainly seen Iranian technology, guidance, and know-how when it comes to all the infrastructure of Hamas. We have seen the Houthis in Yemen. People may not even heard about the Houthis, but this is another Iranian proxy, a Shia militia in Yemen, who now all of a sudden is fighting Israel, as if somebody doesn't like jachnun, which is one of the traditional food.
Well, it's a delicious thing for a breakfast.
And this is part of the Israeli, humor sometimes when you get something like this. But we actually had a drone, landing, exploding in a school yesterday in Eilat. And imagine this, that you had these people who were evacuated from the Gaza corridor to Eilat now being attacked by another Iranian proxy. Iran's hand has been very much involved in this. Of course, you can ask the question of why Hezbollah is not entered the fight, in full blossom. Again, not the last word was not yet said here. We're still in the midst of active fighting. We just had a missile just some hours ago shot again by Hezbollah in the north. Iran's hand is involved, has been involved in this. Hamas had connections with Iran since shortly after its formation in 1987. It had offices in Tehran. Tehran have always provided weapon to Hamas. It very much has been involved in building the current infrastructure, the drilling technology, the tunnel technology. It's all Iran related. I think if it's up to Iran and if it's up to Hamas, they wanted to have a whole regional conflagration. Hamas by itself cannot win over the IDF or Israel, but with some help, if there's going to be a way for Hamas and the West Bank and Israeli Arabs and bases in Syria of pro-Iranian militias and Hezbollah join the fight all together, creating a multi-pronged front, then there is a real chance of really causing some real damage. This is one of the reasons why you have seen the Americans taking a very different approach. This is why you have seen a nuclear submarine here and very significant military power to air carriers with the understanding that we do not want this conflagration to move to a whole different scale because it has the potential of doing so. If it's up to Iran, they would create this multi-front conflagration so that eventually Israel is going to be pushed and stretched, and they may be able to have a victory or something much closer to victory. Of course, you would not allow them to do this, and I think Hezbollah understood at some point that the risk may be too risky and may not be worth taking, and therefore it chose a middle path of getting involved but not in full force. And again, the last word was not yet said. If it's up to Iran, this is a full-out war. I think it's more convenient for them to have Hamas fighting than Hezbollah. Hamas is still a Sunni organization. Hezbollah is Shia, much more closer to them. In the old days, we used to say that the Egyptians would be very fiery and says, we will fight for the Palestinian cause until the last drop of Palestinian blood, because they don't really want to fight themselves. And Hezbollah is more Iranian blood in a way, more brothers than Hamas, who may be slightly more dispensable for them. They're happy to support them so they can fight. That's why they were sending all the militias to Syria and elsewhere. It's easier to sacrifice them than to sacrifice the Iranians. But you have to understand, in 2015, it's the first time that we have killed an Iranian general not so far away from our border in the Golan Heights. Since then, in almost every bombing in Syria, we also get either Hezbollah or Iranian al-Quds force. We have seen their involvement in Gaza, and we're certainly seeing the involvement in Lebanon. They're there from the very beginning. They're trying to coordinate, but of course, not everything can be done from Tehran, and you know, we also have our own leverages, and I don't want to also downplay the role of the Americans and others, who I think without them, this scenario could have been much more critical.
Now, of course, coming to the Iranian nuclear ambitions and knowing that they have a very strange kind of a outlook for the future, trying to create a chaos, world chaos, is something that would fit their religious, plans. Mahdi will come and then redeem the world from the chaos, and so nuclear weapon in their hands would be a perfect fit. So do you think that we will see this nuclear ambition being ended?
We have seen this nuclear ambition for many years, and we've also seen that Iran has been determined to dupe the world when it comes to this nuclear game. And if it's up to Iran, they would left for their demise, and they eventually will come to operationalization of their nuclear program, and there has been also people who have been saying that some of this noise is here to make sure that there's going to be other moves taken when people are not paying attention. The nuclear Iran file is a serious file. And if you're really kind of zooming out from all the problems in the Middle East, the broader axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, many of the militias that are fighting in Syria and in Lebanon, when it comes to the Palestinians, is Hamas and Islamic Jihad. It's all Iran. If we're able to move Iran to a different place, and it's not about moving their leadership to a different place, it's just creating a different leadership in Iran. And there are a number of Iranian forces that we know are working to do this. The Iranian leadership, just like the Hamas leadership, on our side, when people thought we can simply, contend them, find a way to deconflict in a way, we just realized that this has been an abysmal failure. If we can use this moment, we need to move Hamas out. If there is ways to push Hezbollah and even more so the Iranian leadership out, that would be the right opportunity to do so, to help and support the forces inside Iran who do this, and to further isolate Iran and understand that the result of not isolating Iran, of giving Iran additional resources, is exactly what we've seen. How could Hamas create all of this? How many resources were required? How much money was needed to build all these tunnels? How much knowledge and know-how? How much energy that otherwise could have been used to actually develop Gaza and turn it into a Singapore? And instead of that, what we're getting, this the most horrendous, horrible infrastructure that is there to produce death to women and babies. That needs to be, and think, engraved in the future of the politics of the Middle East. We need to fight this. We cannot tolerate this. We cannot contend this. We have to really fight and move these types of voices from here, because they're not going to provide any future, any positive future. Neither for us, certainly not for the Palestinians.
And of course, I don't know if you agree with me. There were some reports that the initial plan was to attack during Pesach, but then they waited to get these $6 billion released from the US. That was something that kind of changed their timing. Could it be?
Look, I'm not able to corroborate the particular reports. I think there's going to be more that's going to be surfaced. This particular action was not done haphazardly. It required it requires significant training, significant preparation. We were not able to connect the dots clearly enough to understand that all of this is taking place. They had attacked in 22 different spots simultaneously. The Iranians, they're able to provide enough information, and Hamas utilized the network of workers who worked in Israel. They entered communities knowing where the head of security lives. They entered a community with a map, knowing that they have to go for the gate, turn left, turn right, go into the house of the head of security, kill them first, and then continue. They were able to go and knowing that the car of the person who sits at the gate is usually parked right next to them, so they can take the keys of the car and move with that car, because that car is recognizable for the people of these communities. They think it's one of their friends coming back home, and then coming out and surprise them, kill the relevant people, and continue. They were doing this in a very sophisticated way. We found in their homes the pictures of children with Kalashnikov that we very much know, a whole circle of them, all the shaheeds, and in the middle of it, the permit of going to Israel, reminding us and them that this is how they duped us. Hi, because we allowed them to work, we allowed them to make money. We thought that this is the way to provide peace and partnership. All of that, of course, cannot continue. This entire mindset must change. And the people who created all of this, remind you, were the Iranians. The Iranians were the one that already in 1980, after 1979, they had sent their own children to the war with keys to heaven, blowing themselves on mine sets for Iraq because they did not have enough equipment to clear the mine. So they sent children to blow themselves up to heaven, and they continue to teach us until this very day. That mindset we need to fight.
Well, Israel definitely is in the very front line for the free world and for the West here in the Middle East. And that's why we ask you to stand with Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. The Bible says very clearly, those who love and bless the seed of Abraham shall be blessed, and those who pray for the peace of Jerusalem will prosper. And so thank you for tuning in today. We will see you here again every day, 1 o'clock from Jerusalem. Shalom.